I'm Natasha Kaufman, and welcome to my podcast, Don't Just Talk, Say Something, Lessons on 20 Years of Business. Over the past 2 decades of running my public relations firm, NKPR, I'm so grateful to have met, worked with, and learned from so many talented industry leaders. And I'm so excited to be able to share their stories and life lessons with all of you on this podcast. What a pleasure it is for me to introduce today's guest, George Strombolopoulos, a true icon in the North American media landscape. George has done it all. Just to list a few of his accolades, George has hosted and executive produced everything from shows on MuchMusic to George Strombolopoulos Tonight on CBC to Hockey Night in Canada, and now he hosts his own show on Apple Music. George is also heavily involved in several philanthropic endeavours, including a board we both sit on together, Artists for Peace and Justice. We cover a lot in this episode, from George's outlook on life to his relationship with hope and optimism, breaking his own biases and making risky bets in business. Here's our conversation. Because I've known you for so long, this is the most at peace and truly joyful and happy I've seen you in a long time. You always come across as someone that's got it together, and you obviously always have like this amazing energy, but there has been a shift with you in the last little while. I can feel it. I mean, I'm telling you, it's just you can feel the difference in energy.
You know, I am an angry guy, right? I have this anger in me that comes from being a young, busted up kid from a busted up place. And so I have had various relationships with that. It never bad, but always, street. And what's happened as I've gotten older is, instead of trying to dampen the fight in me, instead of trying to kind of be a mediator in life, as I've often been.
Yeah.
I'm closer now to who I was when I was 18, which is, and I know that I give a fuck about the right things. I just don't give a shit about anything else. And it's put me at odds with a lot of stuff in this culture, but I'm okay with that, because I believe that life's kind of simple. And the more I lean into that, the other big change for me is just getting healthy. Like I was spent a bunch of years working at a pace. I work as much now as I've ever worked, but I work differently. And that's allowed me to focus on my health in a way that I've never done in my life. And that's probably what you're seeing emanating, is the fact that I'm making really conscious health choices in a way that I've never done. So it's kind of, that's been a big change in my life, is just how I eat and how I live.
I mean, I can see that in you. You're honestly, your skin is glowing, like you look great. It is interesting though, and I don't know if this is an age thing, because I feel the same way as you do. I used to make these decisions in my personal life that were good PR, I thought were PR decisions. I didn't realize I was doing that at the time. I always thought that, no, I'm living my sort of authentic life, but I would make decisions personally that I was like, oh, that's PR, but not even realizing it. And then just before COVID, and it was around when I met Eric, where I was just like, you know what? I just want to be happy. And that meant nothing to do with PR or work or anything. It was just, I just want to be with someone that's nice and kind, and I'm cool with that. And then you realize that's really, at the end of the day, and you just said it, it's pretty simple. It's basic, simple stuff.
It's breaking the conditioning that we all have. It's addressing the conditioning that we help perpetuate. But moreover, and this is why I think a lot of people get themselves into trouble, is not blaming anybody for the conditioning in the past. Like, I saw somebody post online today on TikTok, something about how, the trauma from his mom and his dad, and it wasn't like serious crime trauma. It was just, and I thought, my mom was a teenage single mom when she had me. Can you imagine me expecting her to know shit that 50-year-olds don't know today? Like, that's crazy. So I don't blame my why would I? But my circumstances as a kid, it's like this life, everybody did the best they can. And I think the more that you let people off the hook for the shit they didn't really know what they were doing, the easier life is, because you're just not carrying it. Now, I've never held a grudge against any of that part of my life. I've never, you know me, to a fault, I believe in my personal accountability. I don't expect that from other people, but to a fault for me, I hold myself accountable for every single thing that I do. And I don't blame society on any level for my choices. I know my choices. I know where I went wrong. You know, I know my choices. So I don't blame anything else for that. Again, I'm only speaking about me. Everybody has different scenarios and different oppressions and all that I acknowledge. This has just been my experience.
By the way, with you, it's not where you went wrong. It's actually where you went right, because I actually don't believe there are any wrongs. I think that every part of our life journey is a lesson learned that contributes to us getting to a place where we become the best version of ourselves. And so I think that's, important to acknowledge. We sort of went right into the podcast, but I want to say that, the reason I started this particular series was I've had NKPR for 20 years. And I feel very much that this journey, I wouldn't be on this journey if it weren't for all the incredible people that have contributed and have been part of the journey along with me. And I would say you have been a huge part of that. So much of the work that we do philanthropically is together. Artists for Peace and Justice. I mean, I don't remember Artists for Peace and Justice without you, quite frankly. Everything that we did in Canada and even in the US, the fact that we've been able to raise over $33 million for this charity is incredible, and continue to do that. Last 2 years during COVID, we raised almost $2 million. And that was, during COVID, and it was just in Canada. But maybe let's go back a little bit. And do you remember when we first met?
I was trying to think of it. First of all, in the APJ stuff, you do the heavy lift, and a lot of us do what we can to help. But we all know that this doesn't exist without you from day one, by the way. So we definitely know that. I don't remember exactly. I've had a lot of concussions, so my memory's a bit foggy. What I seem to, part of me is connected to, I was playing hockey in LA, and I think you were there one day, and had tweeted about it or something. And that's how I was like, what's going on? I knew who you were, of course, but I was like, what's going on here? And we may have met before that, but that's the memory that stands out to me, is it was connected to playing hockey in LA with our friend Senator.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly, it's so interesting. Because I remember a few different, obviously we met over the course of time at different times, but I remember that so well as well, because I became obsessed with Twitter in the early days, and I tweeted at you because I was watching you play hockey, and it was just, it felt actually great. I remember that particular moment because it was like, we're Canadians in the US. And of course, you do a lot of work in the US. I do tons of business in the US. We both lived our life in a very borderless way. But that was definitely one of the first times. But I feel like when we really connected was probably through APJ. And you came to my house. If you remember, it was one of the film festival parties. And there was just that synergy around. Most people don't know this about you, but you love decor and design. Like, you're a big design buff, art buff, and we really connected over that. And then that kind of came back to how do we use who we are and what we have access to be able to make the world a better place.
Making the most with what we have. Your house is so beautifully designed. I was my life plan was to be an artist, right? I was going to be a designer, an architect, an illustrator, a painter. That was my life plan. And then I thought maybe I'll make films, but I got kicked out of art class, and I failed maths and sciences early in the term. So I couldn't pursue any of the things I actually wanted to pursue because I got kicked out of all of it. So I ended up in this media game by fluke. but I'm grateful for it because it introduced me to a lot of wonderful people. You near the top of that list. It's for me, it's always been about the bands I listened to told me at a very young age, there is an enormous amount of injustice in the world. You are currently experiencing a bunch of it. You are not experiencing all of it. You can't even comprehend all of it. I grew up really poor, you know, in those neighborhoods. So I understood it initially based on my experience, but all these bands kept forcing me to challenge my view of my existence. I'm talking to Natasha when I was 11, you know, like I was 11 years old listening to these punk rock bands. And I got a job at 14 working at a sandwich shop, Mr. Submarine. And I was listening to a punk rock band on my headphones one day, my Walkman. And the guy looked at me and said, "What do you like about punk rock?" And I said, "You got to question the answers, man." And he said, "Nah, fuck that. Question the questions." And I went, "What?" And I remember just being, "I don't understand that." And he said, "The people who wrote the questions are flawed and biased." This is 1986.
Yeah.
And everything in my brain changed. Everything in my brain changed. And it was do what you can to carve out space for you and your family, but recognize that you and your family is bigger than just who you think you and your family are. Everybody's your family as best you can. And it was really that to me. So when you cats came to me, you and Paul, about Haiti, you guys didn't know this at the time, but I had studied Haitian literature in college as an elective on my own, because not connected to media whatsoever, not connected to anything. I grew up in neighborhoods that were very Caribbean. And so I was very much influenced by Caribbean culture. But Haiti in particular, I had read a Wade Davis book when I was young about his explorations into Haiti. And of course, listening to the kind of music I listened to and the voodoo shit really worked for me when I was 12. So I just had a love affair with Haiti from the very beginning. So when you and Paul approached me about this, it felt like a no-brainer to me, because I was like, Haiti is really important to me culturally, and it's given so much to us in Canada, especially. And back to that punk rock thing, I know the role the Canadian government and really Western governments played in making sure Haiti stayed in compromised positions. I just had a lot of anger towards my own government, and it's like, this is our job. This is our duty as human beings to do. So Haiti was a perfect place. And I've been there many times with you and other times. And I love that country.
Yeah, and the people.
Yeah.
I love the people of Haiti. Maybe tell us a little bit about that experience for you, the last few times that you've been there.
I like you, I've traveled in places around the world that have been in various states of crisis. Sometimes on the surface in a place like Pakistan during the war, sometimes behind the scenes, but also on the surface, like in Mississippi, where people are experiencing abject poverty. And there are some places you look around and you try to understand, what, systemically speaking, how does this get fixed? Is there a fix? How do I define fix? All that. And a lot of times the answers seem really amorphous. In Haiti, the first time I got there, you start to identify, oh, here's the role interference played. Here's the role economic prisons played. Mm-hmm. Here's the role oppression played. Here's the role this played. Oh, I see this. I see how things could actually work here. Then you realize, as you do your research, as you grow up, that Haiti was the first independent Black republic, and nobody wanted that to work in the white world. So they were going to make sure that everybody saw Haiti fail. And you get to Haiti and you think, man, this place has suffered an enormous amount, but regardless, the human spirit in Haiti, and I know you go anywhere and people, of course, are people, and of course, people are going to be, there's going to be joy and all that, of course, but Haiti's expression of it is well, first of all, it's a language I speak, which is art, and it is so close to us. It is us. Mm-hmm. And well, we're all us, I suppose. So from when I went to Haiti, I looked around and went, yeah, this is exactly, this didn't need to be this way. this didn't need to be this way. And there's lots of joy and amazing stuff in film and art coming there, of course, and always has been, but this doesn't need to be this way. Some of the crisis that exists. And so it kind of fed hope in me. I'm not a particularly hopeful person to begin with. I don't walk around with a lot of hope. To me, it's never been about hope. It's just been about, regardless of my relationship with hope or optimism, I just do the job. I've always been a believer of. I don't know what hope doesn't drive me. Action drives me. So, but when I got there, there was a little bit of like, yeah, I see how we could do this. Not just, I don't mean we like APJ and I don't mean the white savior complex. I just mean how we as a culture could play a role. And as you know, Natasha, as much as I have much disdain for the system of governance that we have in our part of the world, I think there's a way for government to be effective here. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean in platitudes like lead with your heart. I don't mean that. I just mean a good approach to justice, like actual justice. I don't mean the justice system. We could do this. And so it was beautiful. But of course, music and culture and all the things about Haiti, the food, everything about Haiti reaches me on a very, very real level. But seeing that this can actually improve dramatically if the people who have their boots on the throat of the Haitian culture and the Haitian people not only took their boots off, but helped them up.
For sure. I mean, what we decided, and you remember after the earthquake, we thought, well, where should the money go truly that can create real impact and change? And that's when, we went and found the land and built our school. We thought that we would have 350 students in our school. Now we have over 3,000 children in our school.
And we work with a priest. Like that's something you and I would never have done.
Oh, it's so true.
I would never, if a priest had come to me and said, let's do it. I'm like, I don't want a Bible. I don't want to be connected to that. But this priest is special.
Father Rick Frechette is, I've always said that when I'm next to him, that's as close to God as I'm ever going to get. And that's coming from like, a Jewish girl. Like, I just feel, there you go. I just feel, I mean, his history is the fact that he was he went to Haiti for the first time. He wasn't a doctor. He was a priest, and he realized he was burying babies. And he was like, this country does not need a priest. This country needs a doctor. And then he went back to New York, got became a doctor, and then moved back to Haiti. And he's been there, for the past 35 years.
Yeah. And, I'm sure you've seen this many times. You've been there. You and I did this together when, we'd wake up in the morning, we were sleeping in tents, and we'd wake up in the morning and there would be families who lost a loved one that night would drop their body off at the front of the church with the name of the person taped to their chest. And then the body would get carried into the church. Father Rick would perform the funeral. And you would recall, we would lift the body and put it into the back of a pickup truck, and we would take it to either a refrigeration unit or an incinerator. And Father Rick, every day, the sense of duty that drives him to not, like, the spirituality is, of course, the core mechanism in his action, but he doesn't act that way. He acts practically. And that's what I really, really liked about it. And I liked how APJ was designed to be the anti-NGO. Yeah. In the way that Haiti is, after the earthquake and all that money was raised and went to Red Cross, how much of that money actually got there, and how
it was 5%, if you remember. Yeah. And if you remember also, when we went to Haiti and looked at land, the government actually had said, we can give you the land. You don't have to pay for it. And we said, nope, we're going to pay for it because we want nothing to do with the government. Yep. And so we very much were like, nope, we're going to do this on our own, be independent. And then we ended up gifting the land to St. Luke's Foundation so that they could operate. And so, we treated it very differently than the typical NGO, because even now with what's happening with Ukraine, like, I'm also now thinking, I don't want to just send the money to an organization. I want to really think about, okay, if Canada's taking in 50,000 refugees, I want to make sure we're a part of every part of that process of helping them, live in Canada, be in Canada. And so I want to know exactly where that money's going. And so with Artists for Peace and Justice, we know exactly where that money is going. It goes where it's supposed to, which is, to help educate the children of Haiti, because we're all volunteers.
I mean, the fact that there was a math classroom there with my name on it, which is insane based on how I did in math, but it really was a result of the hard work that you and Paul and everybody there did. And David, and seeing, it's like we said right off the top, that it's simple. There is need in the world, and can you do your part? And is your part maybe just a little bit more than you think you can do? Just push yourself a little bit more, which you do, which I do, which people in APJ and other organizations do, and recognizing, like, rest in peace to the great Paul Farmer and the work that he's done. And it's not over there. There is no over there. Everything is right here, and borders are arbitrary, designed politically. Ukraine is what's happening there is, of course, so egregious. Then I think about Canada's public statements on it, and I go, but why did Canada knowingly provide vehicles to Saudi, knowing what they were going to do and atrocities in Yemen? Like, our country is filthy, and every big country is filthy. And so it's addressing what you're talking about. Where does the money go? How do we get people here? How do we make sure that our government isn't complicit in these sorts of oppressions, directly or indirectly, around the world? Like, there's so much work to do, but there's a lot of people on this planet. We could do it. It's not like everybody, you and I we don't think we can save the world. We just do what we can. And that's the key to this. It's just, let's just do what we can, but a little bit more than we think we can. I think real change can happen.
Well, you said something on this podcast that just, I mean, I always connect with everything that you say, and I'm always so inspired by you, always. But you said, hope, I'm not hopeful, and it's not about hope for me, it's about action. Yeah. And, at first when you said that, I'm like, well, that's sort of sad. And then I was like, no, I know exactly what you mean by that. Because it's like, take action, do, don't say, do.
I'm also, and this is part of how I work. I trick my own subconscious too, is that I'm very, very intentional about some of the language that I say out loud, just so that my subconscious doesn't hear me say shit that I know isn't good for me. So what I've been doing, I mean, like Natasha, it trickles down to the smallest, most annoying way, the way I operate. But I'll give you an example just before I go back to the hope thing. A lot of times when I work out, instead of listening to aggressive music that drives me, I put on really sad podcasts that will make me cry, so that when I'm working out and pushing myself physically as far as I can go, I am also not lining up my wiring to be aggressive. What I'm trying to do is work the emotional growth of myself. Because like I said, I'm a pretty, fucking tight young man. So I'm an old man now, but I don't want to equate. I listen to really aggressive music just to go to bed. So I do it in every aspect of my life, whereas like I'm pushing myself to be, hopefully a lovelier, more open version of myself every day. I try to anyway. Sometimes I fail miserably, but I try. So for the reason I say that about hope is I don't want to find a connection between me and the thing that needs to be done. Haiti worked. I was younger. I grew up reading it, so I felt like I could find a place there. But I don't want to have to be related to somebody who has this condition to fight for it. I don't want to, even though my mom is Ukrainian and I was raised in a Ukrainian home, seeing there, like, I care deeply about Ukraine. And sure, there's a little extra of me that wants to go there and pick up and fight for sure. But I would pick up and fight in lots of countries. So I don't want to feel like I need a bridge to the issue or the need for me to participate. That's just, other people do sometimes, and that's okay. I'm just saying, for me, that's why when I say hope, I don't need to have hope to do it. I just need to do what I can do and just do the work. That's kind of how I trick my brain into doing as many things as I try to do. So, and again, I don't want to ever feel emotionally connected to things to have to participate in them.
Tell me, I mean, that I couldn't agree with you more. You're acting now. You're doing a bit of that, and you're nominated for an award, which is very exciting.
Yeah, I'm somehow nominated for a screen award. That's kind of funny.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so proud of you. I love that. And you're exercising and you've had a bit of a life change. What was the catalyst for that? Like, when was that sort of moment for you where you're like, that, you know, you talk about happiness and joy and that you just are, you know, it feels more real right now, but what was it that kind of sparked all that?
About 2 years before I left the talk show, I was talking to another network in the US about doing a talk show with them. And so I was flying across the country a lot in meetings, and it was an interesting time. So I was reading a book about people who do what I do for a living. And there's a select few, right? There's only a handful. I think there's only 7 or so people in the English speaking world who've hosted a talk show for a decade or more on a daily basis who aren't doing one now. Like it's a small group of people, relatively speaking. So I was reading this book, and a narrative kept being repeated. I guess that's how it became a narrative, that you are defined by your chair. And the job is the thing, and you never leave the job because the show is the thing. Now, I knew internally that I had sort of felt like I couldn't grow past where I was at CBC. I didn't feel like it. The culture and the culture of the place, no disrespect, but the culture of Canadian media, I was kind of like sealing out a little bit there in terms of what I wanted to do. And it wasn't like, oh, I want another job. It was what I thought we could do with it. So I was doing the show. I knew this for a couple of years before, but I was just kind of doing the show, and I loved the show, and I put everything I had into it. But I'm talking to this other network about a show, and I'm reading this book, and I'm reading this narrative about the chair. And I said to myself on a plane, I said, that's not me. Like, I'm not defined by my chair. And then I realized how smug that was, because I fucking was. Because it was my job. It's all I've known for 25 years at this point, 20 years at this point, was being a host and a producer. Like, that's all I knew, was to do that for like most of my life. And I thought right away, as soon as I said it, no, you are, dude. You are. And you could keep doing this job comfortably for the rest of your life, and you could do this. Versions of this, you could do this. And I thought, I don't think that's the play. I think the play is blow it up, because anybody can coast. And I felt like it was starting to coast, never in the work ethic, but just it was always a version. I don't think I've ever told anybody this, but I'm telling you. And I thought, like, I looked around and went, I don't think this should be it. So I did CBC for a couple of years. They changed management. I knew that my time there wasn't going to last for long anyway. And I got the Hockey Night in Canada offer, which I knew wasn't going to work. I even called a couple of the head people. Yeah. I've told you that it wasn't going to work, right? I'm like, this isn't going to work. There's no fucking way it's going to work, because they're never going to let me do the thing that they wanted me to do. I knew that. But they said, no, we want it to work. And so I was like, all right, cool. So they offered me this long ass deal. I countered with a short deal, like super short. We settled somewhere not in the middle, but pretty decent number. And I knew, and I remember saying to my manager and lawyer, like, look, this ain't going to work. So let's just sign the kind of contract so that when it ends, it's a reset. And I knew it was going to blow up. And it kind of blew up the way I thought it would blow up in a way. But you know what, all the press that talked about, Hockey Night in Canada, never talked about the fact where Rogers told me when I was the host, the ratings went up for women and people under 30, which is what they wanted, me to do, which is to grow the game. But I knew they were never going to let it happen. And that's okay. I begrudge nobody for it. But I knew that it would end, and that when it ended, it would end because I was me. And I was uncompromising about my values of inclusion. I was uncompromising about my values of energy. And I knew that. And I knew that it would put 10 more years on my career, because suddenly I was the young guy who couldn't fit in. So it was strategy in many respects, right? I wanted it to work at hockey, but I knew it wouldn't, right? So when that ended, I sat back and went, okay, so now what I'm going to do is do the thing I've never focused on before, which is learning how to do another version of this. and don't take another job. Don't take a show. And I decided to approach the next half of my career the way I approached the first half of my career, which is ground floor it all. Do it because you love it. Nothing else matters. It doesn't matter if you run out of money. None of this matters. You'll be dead anyway, and no one will remember you. Doesn't matter, right? Like, that's life. So I made some risky bets on myself that many people in my circle didn't think were wise, but they were risky bets, but I did them because I recognized that it's not that I thought they would work. I just didn't care about the outcome. And I knew I had to build something. Now I feel like, I mean, I've been so lucky because I have a show now that's the biggest show of my life. It's in 165 countries. So in terms of numbers, it's the biggest show. The company I work with, Apple, treats me beautifully. It's not the only thing that I do. I started directing and producing films. One of the films I helped produce just won an award in Vegas. Another one is about, like, I'm learning. What I was trying to do was learn, because I missed going to a place and not knowing anything about how to do it. So I'm like, just go do shit you don't know how to do and do it anyway. And I love learning how to make things and not worrying if anybody's going to like it. And then I started a tech company that you don't know yet about, but that's coming down the pipe. That's kind of getting some pretty crazy people involved, and we can't announce it yet, but I will. And I've been working on all this other stuff, and everybody stops you on the street and goes, "Hey, so what are you doing now?" Because they know you from TV. And for a lot of people, it's difficult when they don't get, I'm like, "Oh no, I'm your friend. That's what I'm doing. I'm making a show. I'm doing this." I don't worry about any of that stuff, because that's not the stuff that I cared about. What I care about is if somebody says hi to me, that I make them feel like they're the most important person in the world, because they are. And there's no difference between them and anybody, and me and you, and we're all the same. And I focus my mental energy on learning how to do a thing the same way I learned how to do it in the first place, right? And the same mechanisms. And I've been very, like, and it could all go away tomorrow. That's the thing. It could all go away tomorrow, and it doesn't matter to me, because it's a privilege to have any moment in this life where you can have any version of self-determination. I recognize that not everybody gets that.
Well, because you're not married to the outcome. I think that's what's so interesting. It's like, you're not doing it because of the outcome. You're doing it because you're in the moment. And you do, by the way, make every single person you meet and talk to feel like the most important person in your world right at that moment when you're with them. You have this incredible ability to do that.
Did I ever tell you what my mother used to make me do when I was like 7 years old?
No.
So my mother, I may have told you that when she couldn't afford a babysitter, she would drop me off at a public library, and she would ask the librarians not to let me leave, right? Mm-hmm. So that was my childhood, was in a library. But she would pick me up for lunch, take me down the street to a senior citizen's home, and she would tell me, "Go inside. There's somebody in there who's alone, who nobody comes to visit, and it's your job as a human being to spend time with them. You need to learn from them, but more importantly than that, you need to be good company for them. That's your job as a human being. You're not special. You're special to me, but you're not special. Your only real value in this life is how you treat other people, and not how you feel about it. There's no sense of pride here. There's no sense of accomplishment. There's no sense of achievement. Just go do the work." She also wanted me to go to heaven, so I missed on that part, but the first part, so that's what my mom did. So, I'm super shy and introverted by nature. You'll see me in public where I really won't say much to people unless they come up to me, but I won't initiate. It's just because I'm shy, and less shy now, more introverted now than, and the pandemic has been fucking great for that, because I know,
anything. I loved it too. You and I are the same that way. I could do this all day long.
All day long. I don't need that thing, right? That some people need, which is weird considering what you and I both do for a living, where our jobs, but I think you and I being good at the public thing, and we're both experienced at it. I actually think that's our second language. I don't think that's our first language. I think one of the reasons you and I get along is that there's an element of how people don't understand you, and I think there's an element that they don't understand me, and I think everybody experiences that. And I think you're in your head more than people might realize, and I am too, and lots of people are. So I I think that we just found a way to get through, and it was our coping mechanism probably when we were younger, you know, to figure out a way to be okay. I know certainly that was probably the case for me. But it's only about, yo, dude, that person's fucking lonely today. And I would honestly, Jimmy was my guy. So Jimmy was a senior citizen guy from World War II, who I would sit in his room in the senior citizens home and just talk to him and ask him questions and listen. And he would just treat me like, not like a kid. He would treat me like a grown up, and I was 7, you know? And so that's, I think, how I learned the value of how other people's experience is actually probably more important than your own in this, because you're already the star of your own movie in life, in your own head, but that doesn't mean you get to go do whatever you want.
It's true. I mean, I always say that I'm the director of my own life. So I
Yeah.
get to own my successes. I get to own what I call my key learnings. And yeah, 100%. It
And
is
also,
interesting.
but as you know, a great director's job as well, you do all that stuff, and something you do beautifully is a director's great job is to give everybody else a space to shine.
Yeah,
Let other people shine. That's what you do. That's what I try to do. That's what interviewing is.
you absolutely do that. It's interesting to hear about you being an introvert, because most people don't realize that about both of us. We are introverts. We get our energy from being alone versus getting it from others. So when we are around a lot of people, it can be, we're fine, but it can be overwhelming for sure. And we don't make the same sort of level of connection when there's so many people around. You know, learnings, when I think about the last 20 years, and you've been a big part of that, what do you think, you know, I certainly know what I have learned from you, and I will tell you that in a little bit, but what do you think you might have learned through the relationship that we have?
What I learned that there's and this is something that people, there's a thing that people always say about collaboration, right? Which is, and how important it is, which is true. It's true. But I actually think it's only like a quarter true. And most people don't want to tell the real truth, which is, and this is what I did learn from you, is that yes, collaboration is important. Yes, team is important. Yes, all that. But you know what? Just go fucking do it. And you went and carved out something that you carved out a space for yourself that did not exist. And you carved out a space for people who do what you do for a living in a way that did not exist in Canada. And I think you had to do it again. I don't know all the details of how you, what drove you to do it the way you did it, but you have a belief in yourself, and you just went, fuck it. And I grew up doing it similarly, but not as intentionally as you did it. And I learned a lot from you, and just like, yeah, man, go do it. Put your name on it. Do it. I didn't want to call my show Strombo Show. I didn't want to do any of that stuff, right? Put your name on it, but not just put your name on it. Make your name mean something that's not about you. Make your name mean something that's there for others. And so I learned a lot about how you built your path, right? And how other people could learn. I didn't know that shit that well, but being close to you, and you're gracious enough to let me in on some of that, watching your story, I was like, oh, this is fucking cool. No one's done that. I didn't know how to do that before. I learned a lot of that from you.
I mean, thank you for saying that. I might even get emotional saying this, but you know, I was 18 when I had Justin. I was super young. And when you and I met, we very much sort of connected over the fact that I was such a young mom. And when you talk about, you know, paving the path, you know, in many ways, it was my greatest compass was my son, because I had him so young. I was a kid with a kid, but the only thing I knew is that I couldn't afford to make bad decisions, because I needed to make sure that every decision I made, he would be proud of me for. And I remember, you know, finding sort of my way in business and life, and being almost a bit embarrassed at the fact that I had a child so young. And I remember telling you that, you know, I had a son, and I had him when I was 18, and you praised me for it. We connected over the fact that your mom had you so young, and your sister's name is Natasha, you know, the same as mine. And there was just this.
And my sister was also a young mother. Yeah.
And there was just this connection. And I honestly, ever since then, had felt this incredible sense of pride in having him as young as I did. And I'm going to get emotional talking about it. And I, I thank you for that, because that is the power that you have, which is connecting with every single person, making them feel like they're the most special person in the world, but the impact that that has, not just in the moment, but for life, is incredible.
You know, I listen, I didn't realize that you remember that, but I couldn't even have imagined another way to react. You know, my mom, I remember being a boy. My father split, I think, when I was 7, and I didn't see him after that. I think I've seen him like 4 times in my life, right? Since then, not even. And I remember how hard it was for my mom. She would get up in the morning, she would deliver a newspaper, right? She would deliver a newspaper. She would come home from her, like, we're talking 5:30 in the morning. I'd help her pack the newspapers up. You know, you put the section with this section, off the front porch. So I remember my mom would deliver a newspaper in the morning. Then we'd have breakfast and I'd go off to school. Then when I'd go off to school, she would work at this Greasy Spoon Greek restaurant by the airport in Toronto, where she worked with men who were fucking pigs, right? And the way they talked to her, and my mom knew she could not say anything in return because she couldn't lose this job, because she had 2 young kids. She was doing it by herself. So my mom had to just fucking take it. What these guys didn't know was that, because my mom's this little blonde Ukrainian woman, my mom was hot. She was like this killer, but my mom was like this young, my mom, when you see those girls from the 70s, that was my mom, right? And big curly fucking blonde hair. What these Greek men didn't know was that my mom spoke Greek, because she was Ukrainian, because she taught herself Greek so she could speak to her mother-in-law. And so my mom just had to sit and listen and suffer this indignation. She never told me this, by the way. I just knew this watching this happen. My mother had to just quietly take this indignation from these fucking men. And not all men suck, but some do. And these guys were saying shitty. So finally, my mom one day spoke to them in Greek, right? And she says, you know, I hear what you're saying. And they panicked.
Good for her.
And they panicked. My mom is so badass. She's the wilderness. My mom is the wilderness. And then so she would do that job, and then she'd put herself through nursing school at Humber College. So while I was going to high school, my mom was going to college to try to get herself a nursing diploma at the time, to be an RNA, what they were calling it back then. And I was watching the workload that my mom took on and the energy she had. And I was like, how does anybody do that? Like, how does end with no education, almost no support? I'm very lucky. I come from an ethnic family. So, you know, her mom, like my family is small, but close and supportive. But I looked around and then I saw all the shit my mother had to go through. I'll get emotional thinking about it. And it fed a lot of the anger in me of, like, I will never be perfect, but I will be on the right side of history. I won't all do things the right way, but I will be on the right side of history. I was so like, and so when I meet, and I understand the shame you would feel, because I've seen it a lot in my growing up. And, you know, I grew up in a neighborhood where there were a lot of teen moms. So, and then I look at what these young girls are going through and I think, okay, so you have 2 choices. Your choice is to, not me, but I watch how people react, not just men, but women, how they react to young moms. I was like, you have 2 choices: to make them feel worse or to make them feel loved. And by the way, making them feel nothing is the same thing as making them feel worse. So you have only these options. Why would you be an obstacle? It just makes no fucking sense. So if I meet somebody, and when I said to you, I genuinely mean it, because that's an impossible task. You know, you didn't grow up with a bunch of money. You didn't grow up like you built this shit. And you and your son get along. Like, my mom and I disagree on everything politically. We disagree on everything spiritually. But my mom and I now, I'm 49, we have the most loving, tender relationship where we make each other laugh. We give each other the gears all the time. My mom has never been my friend. I have never been her friend. She is my mom. And we have never been like, oh, we have never seen eye to eye. But her values, I value. And why would anybody look at somebody in a state of distress in any way, be it external or just internal pressure and shame? Why would you exacerbate that? It just means you're a bad person. And I just don't have any time for that. So no, I got love for anybody who perseveres.
Yeah, no, totally. And thank you for that. I always end the podcast with this question, which is ask me anything. You know me pretty well. Is there anything you've always wanted to know about me, or any question that you've had that you've never asked?
I want to know when you're done with this. Like, because I have some experience in this field in terms of being here. But when you do a thing for as long as you and I have done a thing, I just passed my 30 years in the business, 30 years on the air. And when you do a thing for as long, and you've done this for longer, but you've had your own company for 20, as much as you can love something, you're changing, your experiences are changing, your capacity to experience more is growing. So I'm curious, you don't have to answer this because you have employees, but if I'm being real talk, I want to know, like, inside when it's time to change years before you make the change.
I'm going to answer it because, I know exactly what you mean, because I can tell you, there are periods of time when I feel like I'm just not excited anymore. But what I will say is when that happens, I pivot. So what I've done is I'll pivot to, I started the angel investment company, or I'll pivot to saying, well, I'm going to take on more startups so I can invest in them so that I can feel the build again. So that I'm contributing to the build of something. So when I feel that, I pivot to create that excitement for myself again. And I just don't know the answer to that. I feel like when I get to the point where that feeling of I'm just not feeling excited or enthusiastic when I wake up in the morning, that's when I'll stop. I don't think I actually have an exit strategy. What I will say is I am taking more vacations. I am taking more time for me. I'm trying to sort of, I'm trying to create more space to think, as opposed to always do, which, tends to be my go-to. So I don't know. I do know that if I feel that feeling of, I just am not loving this anymore, I'll hire a CEO or president for my company, and I'll do something else. It's just, I think for me, I've learned how to pivot within what I'm doing. I started Shop NK because I was like, I want to own a retail store, but so I'm going to do that. So I'm always sort of pivoting. But I will say there have been moments where I'm just like, this just isn't fun right now. And then when that happens, I have to change course a bit in order to make it interesting for myself. So I don't know, but I will say there is a part of me, if I can be totally vulnerable, that scares me.
Dude, your two initials are the company. Like, it's your thing. It's hard to walk away from your thing.
Because it defines, I feel like it defines me.
Yeah.
And
well, I know you pretty well, and I could tell you it doesn't. Like, I think you define it. But it's really, it's not surrendering, because I think surrender is an overused phrase, because sometimes fight, right? Don't surrender, fight. But I think it's recognizing that you can do lots of things, and also doing nothing is amazing. I haven't taken vacation in years either. I don't know. I haven't missed a single show in this Apple show since we launched. Like, I know that experience. You know what I do? I take the thing I hate to do. I built a lot of rules in my life, right? I quit drinking, I quit drugs, I quit meat, I quit dairy. I'm a man who exists with no vices, and I am a viceful man. I don't believe in an afterlife, so I think that I exist without vices is a real waste of time. I should be enjoying life more than I am. So I built a lot of guardrails to keep me alive, right? But I realized I'm like, oh, I don't like this at all. I don't like this. Oh, really? Cool. Then go do it. So there's movies that I don't like, there's genres of movies that I cannot stand. So you know what I started doing? Started making them. I'm starting to write them. So I would never wear those shoes. Go fucking buy a pair and wear them. No rules, no rules, no rules. Have only values and core values, but all this other stuff is arbitrary. So that's what I've been doing. I take, when I feel like, because I also like you, I feel like everything I do now, I recognize in my career, pretty much everything I do now is going to be a version of something I've already done before. Right. And unless you pivot and add new layers to it,
Yeah.
It's just going to be that. And for some people, that's good enough. And I bless them for it. Good for you. I'm not like that. Right. So it's about finding new ways to gain energy of it. My biggest challenge is finding people who can keep up with me, like people who want to run at a pace I want to run at. It's, you know, people go, oh, you're a workaholic. I'm like, no, I'm not a workaholic. I think work's stupid. Like, I don't like working. I do the thing I love to do because it provides something, and I think I'm okay at it, and I like to do it. But I don't work for the sake of work. This is art to me. The challenge is finding a way to make the art pay us enough money that we can keep doing it and do good 100%. Things with our money. You know, if I get paid a certain amount of money, I start a scholarship with the Music Therapy Trust Fund. Like, I want to do good shit with money. So I want to make money. Also, I like having a reasonable place to live. And I recognize we live in a capitalist, well, we live in crony capitalism. So, but I feel like this is actually 24/7 in my head about getting that sound in my head, you know, into the keyboards or onto a canvas when I'm painting, or in a film that I'm making, or an interview I'm doing, or a friendship that I'm like, you and I are great friends. We don't talk to each other nearly enough. You know, we don't text each other but we're both busy, but we also understand we have a love that's real. And so we can have time and space because we have lives. But all that stuff is my brain is 24 on this. And most people are, I was working with somebody, you'd laugh at this. I had it off camera. I'll tell you about my week leading up to the first short I directed. And so this Saturday morning, the culmination of the week, I was sitting down at like 7:30 out in the morning, and this guy I worked with walked up to me. His name was Joshua. He's amazing. And I was there, and we started talking about what we were doing. And then I had a meeting show up at 8 o'clock in the morning, and he just looked at me and he went, I'm fucking done. I can't. And he walked away because he's like, you're gonna, but in a good way. We were joking. Yeah. Because this pace is insane. And I went, I know, but I love to do cool shit. And then I carve out time where I don't eat all day. I eat my first meal at like 5 o'clock, and I keep senior citizen hours. And at 5 o'clock, I sit on the couch and I fucking watch a couple of dumbass TV shows. I eat dinner, and then I go back to it. And that drives, that's so much fun, right? So that's how I keep, that's why I'm like, people go, I'm never going to retire from creating stuff. I'll definitely retire from doing the thing I always do, but doing different things is what makes this a full experience.
I love what you said about it's no rules, just values.
Just values. Well, because I have these rules. You know, the simplest one, I was watching how many people, myself included, would make fun of Crocs, right? And I was like, man, I've never even worn Crocs. So I bought a pair of Crocs.
No.
Check this out. I wore them to a grocery store. Now, granted, my Crocs have skeletons on them, but they're Crocs. And I got this really like ultra cool singer in a band send me a DM that went, bro, you wore them on the boulevard? And I'm like, uh-huh. He's like, I got them too. And I was like, fuck, man, normalize Crocs. So I put on Crocs, and I will just wear them. And people do not, I'm wearing a t-shirt with a satanic band on it. People are like, what are you doing? Why are you wearing Crocs? And I'm like, because I used to make fun of them, and I had no reason to make fun of them. I was just part of the echo chamber pile-on that cool kids think they should do. Fuck the cool kids. So I bought Crocs. That's what I've been doing.
That's so funny. You have to send me a picture of them. That's hilarious.
You
But
would
that's
laugh
so
at this.
interesting. You make such a good point. It's like, why are there these rules that we're putting in front of ourselves? Like we're just holding ourselves back to just being open. And
Yeah.
isn't that what life is sort of all about, is just being open?
Being open, and I realized a long time ago that I don't care what I think about something. Like my opinion is not a fact. My opinion, even when people say your truth, like my opinion is a version of a truth, but it's not really a truth. It's just an opinion. We don't need the word truth for it because it's an opinion. We already have a word for that, right? So my opinions aren't, I'm not Stephen Hawking. I'm not Dr. Angelo. Like my opinions are just, and they're Dr. Angelo's opinions. I've spent time with her, like they're her opinions too. So what do I know? And I was listening to I was watching some, TikTok, you'll get your algorithm. I saw some stylist on TikTok going on about men, stop wearing leather jackets. Leather jackets are over, da, da, da. And I looked at her and I went, the fuck do you know about anything? The fuck do you know about? The trend isn't leather jackets. Give a fuck what you think, right?
Yeah.
And that's when I started to realize I don't give a fuck what anybody thinks about those things. Now, I still want to wear cool shit that I like,
Yeah.
but I'll break the rules based on my own bias, because my own bias is informed by somebody else's closed bias. And I just don't want to participate in that. Like I made fun of so many bands on the air when I was on the come up in my business that every time I would get ripped publicly for being on Hockey Night in Canada, like, and the attacks were brutal against me, I would say to myself, I deserve it because I did this, not this meanly, but I did this to bands. Now, I stopped doing it to bands a long time ago, but I did it. So I can't expect that I'm just going to, all of a sudden, no one's going to do to me what I did when I thought I knew what I was talking about. No, I deserve this. Bring it on. And so I own my shit and I try to break my own bias because I recognize my bias is just a result of conditioning and media influence and just, closed-mindedness. And I simply don't want to die. I don't want to die with a closed mind. And I kind of feel like we're all directing only one movie, Nat. We're only directing the movie that is the last one that flashes before your eyes before they turn the lights out. So what scenes do you want in that last movie as you're dying? What scenes do you want? What scenes don't you want? So I am removing shit that I don't want to flash before my eyes. And I'm nurturing the scenes that I do want to flash before my eyes. Because I think if you're going to go down watching one final film, that's the one I want to watch.
I love that. George, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for being a huge part of my life for the last 20 years. And
Likewise.
and actually just thank you for being you from everyone. Usually if anyone comes up to me and they're like, are you Natasha Kaufman? I'm like, yes. Oh, do you know George Strombolopoulos? I have to tell you, I get that 9 out of 10 times because they often go on our website and they'll see you and me together. And you are always real and you're always you. And I'm so grateful for that and grateful for the inspiration. So thank you so much. And thank you for being a big part of this with me.
No, thank you. And I feel the same way about you. And you've always surrounded yourself with an amazing team that has also treated me and my team, the same way. And so I'm grateful for all of that and those experiences. And here's to more craziness in the future.
100%. This conversation really moved me. And George, I love your personal outlook these days. Thank you all for listening. I always love hearing from you. Feel free to DM me at Natasha NKPR. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review and rating. Until next time.